They call you Romeo and stuff like that. It's been a wonderful evening, Miss Wingfield. I guess this is what they mean by Southern hospitality.
It really wasn't anything at all.
I hope it doesn't seem like I'm rushing off, but I promised Betty I'd pick her up at the Wabash Depot. And by the time I get my jalopy down there, her train will be there. Some women are pretty upset if you keep them waiting.
Yes, I know, the tyranny of women.
She extends her hand.
Goodbye, Mr. O'Connor. I wish you luck and happiness and success. All three of them, and so does Laura. Don't you, Laura?
Yes.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Laura. I'm certainly going to treasure that souvenir, and don't you forget the good advice I gave you. So long, Shakespeare. Thanks again, ladies. Good night.
He grins and ducks jauntily out, still bravely grimacing. Amanda closes the door on the gentleman caller, then she turns back to the room with a puzzled expression. She and Laura don't dare face each other. Laura crouches beside the Victrola to wind it.
Things have a way of turning out so badly. I don't believe that I would play the Victrola. Well. Our gentleman caller was engaged to be married. Tom!
Yes, Mother?
Come in here a minute. I want to tell you something awfully funny.
Has the gentleman caller gone away already?
The gentleman caller has made an early departure. What a wonderful joke you played on us.
What do you mean?
You didn't mention that he was engaged to be married.
Jim? Engaged?
That's what he just informed us.
I'll be jiggered. I didn't know about that.
That seems very peculiar.
What's peculiar about it?
Didn't you call me your best friend down at the warehouse?
He is, but how did I know?
It seems extremely peculiar that you wouldn't know your best friend was going to be married.
The warehouse is where I work, not where I know things about people.
You don't know things anywhere. You live in a dream, you manufacture illusions. Where are you going?
I'm going to the movies.
That's right. Now that you've had us made such fools of ourselves, the effort, the preparations, all the expense, the new floor lamp, the rug, the clothes for Laura, all for what? To entertain some other girl's fiancé? Go to the movies. Go. Don't think about us. A mother deserted and unmarried sister who's crippled and has no job. Don't let anything interfere with your selfish pleasure. Just go. Go to the movies.
All right, I will. The more you shout about my selfishness to me, the quicker I'll go, and I won't go to the movies.
Go then. Go to the movies, you selfish dreamer.
Tom smashes his glass on the floor. He plunges out on the fire escape, slamming the door, and Laura screams in fright. The dance hall music becomes louder. Tom stands on the fire escape, gripping the rail. The moon breaks through the storm clouds, illuminating his face. Tom's closing speech is timed with what is happening inside the house. We see, as though through soundproof glass, that Amanda appears to be making a comforting speech to Laura, who is huddled upon the sofa. Now that we cannot hear the mother's speech, her silliness is gone, and she has dignity and tragic beauty. Laura's hair hides her face until at the end of the speech she lifts her head to smile at her mother. Amanda's gestures are slow and graceful, almost dance-like, as she comforts her daughter. At the end of her speech, she glances a moment at the father's picture, then withdraws through the portieres at the close of Tom's speech. Laura blows out the candles and we play. I didn't go to the moon. I went much further. For time is the longest distance between two places. Not long after that, I was fired for writing a poem on the lid of a shoebox. I left St. Louis. I descended the steps of this fire escape for the last time and followed from then on in my father's footsteps, attempting to find in motion what was lost in space. I traveled around a great deal. The city swept about me like dead leaves that were brightly covered but torn away from their branches. I would have stopped, but I was pursued by something. It always came upon me unawares, taking me altogether by surprise. Perhaps it was a familiar bit of music. Perhaps it was only a piece of transparent glass. Perhaps I am walking along the street at night, in some strange city, before I have found companions. I passed the lighted window of a shop where perfume is sold. The window is filled with pieces of colored glass, tiny transparent bottles in delicate colors, like bits of a shattered rainbow. Then all at once, my sister touches my shoulder. I turn around and look into her eyes. Oh, Laura, Laura, I try to leave you behind me, but I am more faithful than I intended to be. I reach for a cigarette. I cross the street. I run into the movies or a bar. I buy a drink. I speak to the nearest stranger. Anything that can blow your candles out. For nowadays, the world is lit by lightning. Blow out your candles, Laura, and say goodbye. That was a freaking long one, man.
It's Minister.
Alright.
Okay. The Catastrophe of Success. It was an essay published in Things and then is now included in the introduction in this edition of the play. This winter marked the 3rd anniversary of the Chicago opening of the Glass Menagerie, an event that terminated one part of my life and began another, about as different in all external circumstances as well could be imagined. I was snatched out of virtual oblivion and thrust into sudden prominence, and from the precarious tendency of furnished rooms about the country, I was removed to a suite in a first-class Manhattan hotel. My experience was not unique. Success has often come abruptly into the lives of Americans. The Cinderella story is our favorite national myth, the cornerstone of the film industry, if not of the democracy itself. I have seen it enacted on the screen so often that I was now inclined to yawn at it, not with disbelief, but with an attitude of who cares? Anyone with such beautiful teeth and hair as the screen protagonist of such a story was bound to have a good time one way or another, and you can bet your bottom dollar and all the tea in China that one would not be caught dead or alive at any meeting involving a social conscience. No, my experience was not exceptional, but neither was it quite ordinary, and if you are willing to accept the somewhat eclectic proposition that I had not been writing with such an experience in mind, and many people are not willing to believe that a playwright is interested in anything but popular success, there may be some point in comparing the two estates. The sort of life that I had had previous to this popular success was one that required endurance, a life of clawing and scratching along a sheer surface, and holding on tight with raw fingers to every inch of rock higher than the one caught hold of before. But it was a good life, because it was the sort of life for which the human organism is created. I was not aware of how much vital energy had gone into this struggle until the struggle was removed. I was out on a level plateau, with my arms still thrashing and my lungs still grabbing at air that no longer resisted. This was security at last. I sat down and looked about me, and was suddenly very depressed. I thought to myself, this is just a period of adjustment. Tomorrow morning, I will wake up in this first-class hotel suite above the discreet hum of an East Side boulevard, and I will appreciate its elegance and luxuriate in its comforts and know that I have arrived at our American plan of Olympus. Tomorrow morning, when I look at the green satin sofa, I will fall in love with it. It is only temporarily that the green satin looks like slime on stagnant water. But in the morning, the inoffensive little sofa looked more revolting than the night before, and I was already getting too fat for the $125 suit which a fashionable acquaintance had selected for me. In the suite, things began to break accidentally. An arm came off the sofa. Cigarette burns appeared on the polished surface of the furniture. Windows were left open, and a rainstorm flooded the suite. But the maid always put it straight, and the patience of the management was inexhaustible. Late parties could not offend them seriously. Nothing short of a demolition bomb seemed to bother my neighbors. I lived on room service. But in this, too, there was a disenchantment. Sometime between the moment when I ordered dinner over the bed and when it was rolling into my living room like a corpse on a rubber-wheeled table, I lost interest in it. Once I ordered a sirloin steak and a chocolate sundae, but everything was so cunningly disguised on the table that I mistook the chocolate sauce for gravy and poured it over the sirloin steak. Of course, all this was the more trivial aspect of a spiritual dislocation that began to manifest itself in far more disturbing ways. I soon found myself becoming indifferent to people. A well of cynicism rose in me. Conversations all sounded as if they had been recorded years ago and were being played back on a turntable. Sincerity and kindliness seemed to have gone out of my voices. I suspected them of hypocrisy. I stopped calling them, stopped seeing them. I was impatient of what I took to be inane flattery. I got so sick of hearing people say, "I loved your play," that I could not say thank you anymore. I choked on the words and turned rudely away from the usually sincere person. I no longer felt any pride in the play itself, but began to dislike it, probably because I felt too lifeless inside ever to create another. I was walking around dead in my shoes, and I knew it, but there were no friends I knew or trusted sufficiently, at that time, to take them aside and tell them what was the matter. This curious condition persisted about 3 months, till late spring, when I decided to have another eye operation, mainly because of the excuse it gave me to withdraw from the world behind a gauze mask. It was my 4th eye operation, and perhaps I should explain that I had been afflicted for about 5 years with a cataract on my left eye, which requires a series of